Welcome to the Gen X Journey podcast. Dive into all things important to Gen Xers, from advice on aging parents, expert interviews, product reviews, and heartfelt conversations. So put down the joystick, grab your Walkman, dust off your old yearbooks, and welcome to the Gen X Journey.
Welcome back to the Gen X Journey podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Live Aid.
Yeah, I am excited about this episode. In fact, this is a series of 3 episodes that we're going to be recording up until the July 13th, 40th anniversary of the epic performances of Live Aid back in 1985. And so the 3 episodes that we'll be doing to lead up to it today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of and the origins of the Live Aid concert. Then we are going to be talking about now we all know about the epic performance of Queen. It's been notarized as possibly one of the greatest rock concerts in history, not just during that concert series. But so we know about that one. So we wanted to talk about another artist that really, in my opinion, had the most epic day of all during Live Aid, and probably something that's going to be hard to replicate again for reasons we'll discuss. And then the last one, we're going to be talking about basically the top best concerts of Live Aid. And we're going to air that episode the week before the anniversary. So if you're feeling nostalgic or have not ever seen Live Aid, it will give you a good tip of the best concerts performed and the YouTube links to go watch those shows during that time. But Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you today. Let's talk a little bit about what was Live Aid exactly.
Yeah, you bet. And those of you listening, if you're not familiar with the Live Aid performances, really, would encourage you to hop on YouTube and just run through all the videos that are available about Live Aid. It was an epic music event for Gen Xers. It was really an iconic music moment for all of us. And, to tell you more about Live Aid was a benefit concert. It was held on July 13th, 1985. And its purpose was to raise funds for famine in Ethiopia. It was inspired by devastation depicted in a BBC report. Musician Bob Geldof, along with Midge Ure, they organized this event after success of the charity single "Do They Know It's Christmas," which was launched during Band Aid. And if I remember right, was another charity event.
It was more of a kind of the British version of the "We Are the World, USA for Africa" deal.
Gotcha. Anyway, the concert featured simultaneous performances at Wembley Stadium in London and JFK Stadium in Philadelphia, and showcased an incredible lineup of 70 artists, including legendary names like Queen, which is probably, as Keith mentioned, the most popular story. And if you watch the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, is really highlighted in that movie. U2, David Bowie, and the event really attracted an estimated 162,000 attendees and was broadcast to around 1.5 billion viewers across 100 countries. And
still recorded as one of the top 10 most viewed TV events of all time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And Live Aid raised over 245 million, which I'm convinced if we replicated something like that today, like they would blow that 245 million out of the water.
Agreed.
Probably billion plus is my guess.
Agreed.
But that rate was raised through ticket sales, donations, and significantly impacted the perception of charitable concerts. I guess prior to that, they had not been financially productive for the charitable purposes that they were intended. But anyway, and it really started to help spotlight the ongoing crisis in Ethiopia, which I think sadly still exists in certain aspects. But this groundbreaking event really set a precedence for future benefit concerts and continues to be a significant reference point in the history of humanitarian efforts through music. So, iconic moment. I especially love the Queen story, but we're going to share some really cool stuff from the next 3 episodes.
Yeah, and if you want the Queen story, like you say, watch that Bohemian Rhapsody. There's a lot of YouTube videos about that event and just the chaos that led up to what would become absolutely perfect concert of a few songs. Amazing. So Noel, if you got a chance, why don't you tell us a little bit about the 2 founders of Live Aid, Bob Geldof and Midge Ure?
So Bob Geldof was an Irish singer-songwriter and political activist. Rose to prominence in the late 1970s as the lead singer of the Irish rock band, the Boomtown Rats, which was one of my personal favorites. They're not in my
Yeah.
playlist anymore, but
Yeah.
I was a
I think
I was a
time to bring
I
them
was a
back in.
Boomtown Rat fan for many, many years in the mid 70s.
Before it was born.
Yeah. I was an early adopter
Very.
of the Boomtown Rats, but anyway, he achieved popularity as part of the punk rock movement back in the day in Ireland, and the band had UK #1 hits with his co-compositions "Rat Trap" and "I Don't Like Mondays" and "Honestly, Bob, Who Does."
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Geldof starred as Pink in Pink Floyd's 1982 film Pink Floyd: The Wall. And as a fundraiser, Geldof organized a charity supergroup Band Aid and concerts Live Aid and Live 8, and co-wrote "Do They Know It's Christmas," one of the best-selling singles to date. So he's widely recognized for his activism and especially his anti-poverty efforts concerning Africa. In 1984, he and Midge Ure founded the charity supergroup Band Aid to raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia. They went on to organize the charity super concert Live Aid the following year and Live Aid concerts in 2005. So he is currently an advisor to the One campaign, co-founded by fellow Irish rock singer and activist Bono. Your stomach or our thunder, Steve? Is that
There's just thunder.
That's
It's
impressive.
crazy outside
It sounds
right
like a
now.
stomach. I hear you, Noel.
To me, it's a stomach growling.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a
noise.
terrified dog.
For our listeners, and Steve's got a thunderstorm as we're recording right now, so that's what you're hearing, not his stomach. Just to clarify.
Yeah, just glad we could clarify that. Midge Ure is a Scottish musician, singer, songwriter, and producer, best known as the frontman of Ultravox and co-writer of the iconic charity single "Do They Know It's Christmas" with Bob Geldof. He played a pivotal role in the 1980s new wave and synth pop movements, blending emotional vocals with electronic music. Jur also had a successful solo career with hits like "If I Was" and remains in active music and humanitarian work. His influence extends beyond music through his leadership in organizing Live Aid, which was, like we're talking about today, one of the largest charity concerts in all of human history. So those are our two founders. And Keith, I think you have some information about how they came up with this whole idea.
Yeah. So if you think about how Live Aid started, it goes back to November of 1984 when Jure co-wrote the Band Aid hit "Do They Know It's Christmas?" And basically he wrote that and co-wrote it with the Bob Geldof that you talked about. So Jure was rehearsing with Ultravox for an episode of the Channel 4 music show, The Tube, which Channel 4 was a pretty big London or English-based channel, entertainment channel. But his host handed him the phone, and it was Geldof. And what he basically went off on talking about a BBC News broadcast that he saw on Ethiopian famine. And it got Geldof so emotional about it that he decided to write a song about it. So Geldof provided the initial lyrics, and then Jure basically worked the theme and on a small keyboard in his kitchen. And the second half of the song was basically composed by Jure. And basically he's described the song as not one of the best he's ever written, but the artists that were part of that really was what created the momentum to make it the successful thing it was. So during the studio recording, Jure, he took on the production duties for the song, and basically did a lot of the different editing and mixing, including the 12-inch version, everything's like that. But in addition to this, they set up a Band Aid trust, which actually coincidentally still exists to this day. And it is basically the trust that the money went into to provide aid for Ethiopia. And so because of this, Geldof and Jure have been honored with 2 Ivor Novello Awards for writing this song to help support the famine in Africa. So the 25th of November in 1984, the song was recorded at Sam West Studios in Notting Hill in London and was actually released 4 days later, which if you think about music production, that's fast. That's super fast. And so it's actually stayed at #1 for 5 weeks in the UK and was #1 on Christmas Day. And it actually became the fastest selling single ever in Britain and raised $8 million. But this was the problem. Geldof and Jure had initially thought that it was going to raise over 70 million pounds instead of the 8 million. So that's kind of what spawned them to think bigger and better. And Geldof set his sights on staging a huge concert to raise further funds. And so that's kind of where the idea for Live Aid spurned, was from the Band-Aid's song, Do They Know It's Christmas? And if you don't know the title, if you hear it, you'll know it. It's a very famous song. So
it seems to be like every seventh song on the radio these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can hear those bells, ding, 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 all that stuff. So,
yeah.
Actually, it gets a little annoying. If I'm not lying, I probably turn it off, but there you go. So anyway, so Steve, do you want to kind of elaborate on how the transition happened to Live Aid?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, that Band-Aid trust is now worth $175 million. I just looked that up real quick. I was curious about that.
Yeah.
The idea to stage a charity concert to raise more funds for Ethiopia originally came from Boy George, the lead singer of Culture Club. And so
how about that?
If you're a Gen Xer and you don't know who Boy George is, check your Gen X card. So George and Culture Club drummer John Moss had taken part in the recording of Do They Know It's Christmas. And in the same month, the band was undertaking a tour of the UK, which culminated in 6 nights at Wembley Arena. On the final night at Wembley, which was the 22nd of December in 1984, an impromptu gathering of some of the other artists from Band-Aid joined Culture Club on stage at the end of the concert for an encore of Do They Know It's Christmas. George was so overcome by the occasion, he told Geldof that they should consider organizing a benefit concert. Speaking to the UK music magazine Melody Maker at the beginning of January 1985, Geldof revealed his enthusiasm for George's idea, saying, if George is organizing it, you can tell him he can call me at any time and I'll do it. As a logical progression from the record, but the point is you don't just talk about it, you go ahead and do it. So hence the creation of really, I guess, action behind the Live Aid concert. It was clear from the interview that Geldof had already had the idea to hold a dual venue concert and how the concert should be structured. And really what a cool concept, not just be in 2 different cities, but 2 different continents.
Yeah.
And,
wild.
And never done before up to that moment. So, the show should be as big as humanly possible. There's no point in just 5,000 fans turning up at Wembley. We need to have Wembley linked with Madison Square Gardens and the whole show to be televised worldwide. It would be great for Duran.
With Duran.
Yeah, Duran to play 3 or 4 numbers at Wembley and then flick to Madison Square where Springsteen would be playing while he's on the Wembley stage, could be made ready for the next British act like the Thompsons or whoever. And that way, lots of acts could be featured. And by the way, this is all Geldof sort of sharing his thoughts behind the creation of it. And you can tell he had grand ideas through this whole process. So he had to call out. Go ahead.
I mean, back in the day, that wasn't really a thing. Like today, that's not uncommon. I mean, heck, we can do that. There's, podcast, webcasts and stuff. I mean, we can watch on our phones, but back then, this was a revolutionary idea to have this sort of a simultaneous broadcast,
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Live Aid production manager Andy Zwick said Bob Geldof had to play some tricks to get artists involved. He had to call Elton and say Queen are in and Bowie's in. And of course they weren't. Then he'd call Bowie and say Elton and Queen are in. It was a game of bluff. And that story is sort of shared if you watch Bohemian Rhapsody, a little bit of that's in there.
Yeah, it is.
But can't imagine that we'll ever see a slate of music talent like we saw Live Aid.
That's crazy.
But
if you've seen the posters of Live Aid with the guitar and the Africa and all of it's enormous. The artists that are on that.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's cool.
So, Noel, you want to take us through the organization piece?
Among those involved in organizing Live Aid were Harvey Goldsmith, who was responsible for the Wembley Stadium concert, and Bill Graham, who put together the American leg in Pennsylvania, or in Pittsburgh, not Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. My goodness. I got the state. I should have just stopped there. Anyway, on promoting the event,
both cities, to be fair. I mean, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia would have been epic.
It would have been.
That would have been cool. On promoting the event, Goldsmith stated, "I don't really get a chance to say no. Bob arrived in my office and basically said, "We're doing this," and it started from there. Um, Incidentally, Bob Geldof is kind of known for his outspoken style. He's very blunt. It's
Yes.
kind of his thing, and he's also, I mean, he's very outspoken about a lot of things. So he's a bit of a controversial person because of that. I think because of just the way he kind of approaches things and says stuff. So this description of how this all came about and everything is certainly in line with his reputation. So um, anyway, the concert grew in scope as more acts were added on both sides of the Atlantic. Tony Verno, one of the inventors of instant replay,
Which is cool. Like the person
yeah,
that created the sports instant replay was instrumental in this, which is wild.
yeah, he so Tony was able to secure John F. Kennedy Stadium through his friendship with Philadelphia Mayor Wilson Goode,
So
and
they
was
decided
able.
to go on a bigger scale than Madison Square Garden. They went to a football stadium, which just blows my mind. That way, like
That's
they
crazy.
thought basketball, then they said, "No, why stop there? Let's go football."
Which Wembley Stadium is
It's
huge,
huge,
so
yeah. Why
I'm
would you
sure they were
go
like,
MSG when you've got Wembley, right?
exactly, exactly. Although MSG is iconic,
It is.
it's not
It is.
it's not even close to the size of Wembley. And
No.
I would think having that image of this big, huge soccer stadium filled with people over in
Yeah.
England, and they pan over here and it's a basketball
Arena.
stadium.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally let
that's
down.
not a good look for the USA.
Right.
So, but anyway, I've wondered about why Philadelphia, and I think it's interesting that it came out because of his relationship with the mayor of Philadelphia at the time, and that's how it ended up in Philadelphia. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, and then and he was also able to procure through his connections with ABC's primetime chief John Hamblin a 3-hour primetime slot on the ABC network, and in addition was able to supplement the lengthy program through meetings that resulted in the addition of an ad hoc network within the U.S., which covered 85% of TVs there.
That's wild.
Yeah, so
This guy was definitely the unsung hero of
Yeah,
this
yeah,
portion of Live
100%.
Aid. I mean,
he
those two
really
guys
was.
were big, but this guy is the key to make this work, really.
Yeah, yeah. Verna was the workhorse behind the scenes, kind of putting into play all of these bold, grandiose visions that Bob Geldof had. Was like, okay, we're doing this, and then
You figure it out.
Here comes Tony Verna, the guy that invented, or one of the inventors of instant replay, and he's like, I can do that, and here he goes. But Verna designed the needed satellite schematic and became the executive director as well as the co-executive producer, along with Hal Uplinger. And Uplinger, who was the co-inventor of Instant Replay, came up with the idea to produce a 4-hour video edit of Live Aid to distribute to those countries without the necessary satellite equipment to rebroadcast the live feed.
It's like,
So,
give it
cool.
to some of these guys that do sports to come up with how, you think about it. I mean, the NFL at this point was coast to coast, right? And they had all of these synchronous games going on. Who better to organize a synchronized event than people who are working on NFL instant replay, all these sports instant replays? I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So the actual concert itself began at noon. And this is interesting because we've got all of this daylight time, but they call it British summertime. So noon British summertime is the equivalent to 7:00 Eastern daylight time at Wembley Stadium in the United Kingdom. And it continued at John F. Kennedy Stadium, JFK, which is now the Lincoln Financial Field in the United States, starting at basically 13:51 British summertime or 8:51 Eastern daylight time. So the UK's Wembley performances ended at about 1700 hours of Eastern Daylight Time, and the JFK performance and the whole concert in the US ended at about 11:05 Eastern Time on the 14th of July. So the concert continued for just over 16 hours. But since many artists' performances were conducted simultaneously in both Wembley and the JFK, the total concert length was actually much longer than that if you put it all together end to end.
Wow.
So pretty crazy. The
cool.
actual concert successfully raised. So you remember, if you think about it, the Do They Know It's Christmas did what, 8 million? Wasn't that right? If I go back to
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this one
Exactly right.
successfully raised over 125 million for famine relief in Ethiopia, and they were channeled. The funds were through the Band-Aid Trust established by genxjourneyofficial, specifically to provide aid to those affected by famine. So there was, and so we can talk about. There's a little controversy that's hard to prove one way or the other. The primarily reason to raise them was for famine relief efforts, including providing food, medical aid, rehabilitation assistance, support for various relief agencies like Red Cross and UNICEF, and long-term development assistance, which included projects such as building schools, providing access to clean water and sustainable development, things like that. But it definitely has its controversy. There's been notes that after he handed it to the the head of Ethiopia, he was a very corrupt person, and there's rumors that he bought arms and all sorts of stuff through Russian channels, and nothing is absolutely proven. There's a story on one of the magazines that talk about this, and then there's other research developed by the BBC that kind of says no, that actually didn't happen. There wasn't that kind of corruption. So hard to know. But the point of the matter is we're talking about and celebrating what Gen Xers know as one of the greatest concert events in history. And I don't think, corruption or whatever aside, what we remember as our youth growing up is an amazing event that has never really truly been duplicated in the same way since. There's been some attempts. Live 8 was another one that they did later. But Live 8 is the one that kind of sticks in everybody's mind as the premier music event to raise money for a cause.
Yeah. I said earlier that I thought it would be cool to see something like this happen again. I just don't know that the musical talent out there is it's a lot of music that as a Gen Xer, I don't, especially new music, I don't connect to these days. We've talked about that in past episodes.
Yeah.
Like someone's like, what is this song there? What are they talking about? Did they just say what I think they're saying?
Right.
And
it'd be a lot of bleeped out music.
Yeah. I mean, it would have to be able to cover multiple generations, I think, if they did do something like this again. But it would be neat to see them try, though.
Oh yeah, I think every generation should have something they can celebrate like this.
Yeah,
I got a couple of little known facts that you can impress your friends with the next time you guys are playing Trivial Pursuit. And
all right, let's hear them.
In the Live Aid category, that always is difficult. A teenager named Bernard Watson. He's an 18-year-old high school graduate from Florida. He slept outside JFK Stadium for a week just to get on stage. And
wow.
With zero experience, he convinced producer Bill Graham, and he performed 2 songs, Bob Dylan's All I Really Want to Do and his own song. And it was, he had a couple flaws like the snap guitar string and it dropped his pick, but he kind of earned his place in Live Aid lore. So
that's cool.
That's awesome.
Never heard that story before, but I thought that's pretty cool. But
that's awesome.
And then if y'all have ever watched the U2 performance, this is in Wembley, of course. While singing, Bono spotted a 15-year-old fan that was being crushed in the crowd. He spontaneously leaped into the audience, pulled her out, kissed and danced with her, all while the cameras were rolling, creating a moment that was really kind of a career-defining image. But it may have actually literally saved her life. But
that's wild.
I thought that was kind of cool. And then last little thing here was the officials said no photographers on stage. They weren't allowed to be on the stage. But as Queen was about to start their 21-minute set that's just iconic and legendary, photographer Neil Preston was grabbed by tour manager Jerry Stickles, and he was thrust onto the stage. And that captured, what many consider to be the greatest rock performance ever from the front lines. And so if you ever watched the movie, a lot of the cameraman's there and Freddie Mercury comes up to the camera and stuff like that. Like that didn't happen for any other bands. It was just for Queen because their stage manager or one of their staff members pulled the photographer and threw him on stage and gave us all these images of that whole performance. So
that's awesome.
Cool.
I didn't know that.
Story.
And you see that all the time now. I mean, it's the cameraman's always on stage now.
Sure.
Yeah. But
that's awesome.
Just a few tidbits there.
I tell you, you think about U2. So the Joshua Tree was released in 1986. So this was literally the precursor to their stratospheric rise. It's wild to think about that. They were up and coming. There was a buzz about them, but after this concert and the Joshua Tree, things would never be the same. And U2 was a household name now, and now they're performing in the Sphere in Vegas as they open the Sphere. You think about them as a concert and how they rose to fame because of it. It's wild. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah. Lots of stories like that in Live Aid. And, like I say, I hope that if you're listening to this and you're enjoying the stories of Live Aid, go Google some facts, get on ChatGPT and say, hey, what's something unique about Live Aid that you can tell me? I guarantee you there are thousands of little stories like that are super special about that event. It's just a one-of-a-kind thing.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Yeah. So next episode, we're going to be talking about one of the artists. We've talked about several today, but we haven't mentioned this individual yet. We're going to save them for the next episode. And I will tell you, he is bar none one of my all-time favorite artists. I only had one rock poster in my house when I was a kid, and he was front and center on that poster. So I'm very excited about our next episode and the story behind what this one person did on this day. So stay tuned, and we look forward to bringing the next 2 episodes with you.
Thank you, everybody.
I can feel it coming in the air.
Oh, precursor. Foreshadow.
Hold on.
Stick around.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the Gen X Journey podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of any entity they are associated with. The information provided is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek the advice of qualified professionals for any specific issues they may face. The creators and contributors of this podcast make no representations as to the accuracy, completeness, or validity of any information, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its use.